She asked one question that froze the entire room. How many of the Epstein files were released under the last 4 years? Patel didn't hesitate. 0. You could feel the air shift. This wasn't going to be another routine hearing. For the first time, the people watching realized something deeper was being exposed. And what came next turned that single question into a storm of revelations that had the entire chamber holding its breath. Patel leaned in, almost unfazed by the tension. He said he had released thousands of pages already under his tenure, while the previous administration released none. The crowd murmured. One side called it spin, the other called it justice finally being served.
0.
And how many have you released?
I don't have the number, but it's got to be thousands of pages of stuff.
I was going to ask you to begin whether Americans are safer today than they were 9 months ago, but you cited dramatic increases in criminal arrests since you've taken office, a dramatic decrease in crime that's resulted. Who would have thought that taking criminals off the streets would reduce the crime rate? But somehow we have stumbled upon that new truth. But it begs the question, what was the FBI doing during the 4 years of the Biden administration to see that dramatic an increase in work under your tenure?
The simple answer is I'm letting good cops be cops. We're working with our state and local law enforcement. We're energizing our partnerships. We're bringing on more task force officers. When you have more cops in the streets, when you're using ground-based intelligence, when you're not weaponizing law enforcement and focusing on DC and focusing on the rest of America, this is what happens. It is not a significant mind shift in terms of how we maneuver the FBI. They've wanted to do this work since they signed up. We're just letting them.
And we've seen many prominent Democrats oppose your efforts to restore law and order to the streets of our nation's capital. I mean, all of us here have seen a dramatic change for the better here in Washington, D.C. Why are so many Democrats attacking you for that?
Sir, Democrats have been attacking me for a decade, as is the fake news media. They didn't like the fact that I exposed the Russiagate host and the largest weaponization of the FBI and DOJ in U.S. history. We proved it to be true with congressional oversight. I'm wed to that congressional oversight and will continue to do that work.
Christopher Wray repeatedly warned this committee that the Biden open borders policy had produced a significant increase in terrorist threats that he said kept him up at night. A particular concern, he said, was the 2 million gotaways that entered the country during the Biden administration. That's an average of 41,000 every month. What are the monthly gotaway numbers today?
Sir, I'll have to get back to you on the exact gotaway numbers, but identifying that there are gotaways is step one. Going and manhunting them is step two, and that's what we're committing our resources to do.
Well, that's my next question, is what progress has the administration made in apprehending and removing terrorist threats that came in during the Biden years?
I think you're talking about, if you're not, let me know, known or suspected terrorists, and we've encountered almost zero at the southern border since the southern border has been sealed. But the problem that we are running into is our northern border. It's largely expansive. The enemy has adapted, and we need more focus on the northern border to stop known or suspected terrorists from coming in from places like China, Russia, the Middle East, Africa, Afghanistan.
And what can you tell us about the remaining threat posed by potential terrorist cells here in the United States?
The terrorist threat that continues to be posed by international terrorists here in the United States is one of my highest priorities. We are working through our intelligence community partners to identify those individuals, and we've taken down numerous individuals in numerous rings across this country to neutralize that terrorist threat, including places like New York City, Los Angeles, and I believe Dallas, Texas most recently.
How extensively did criminal cartels like Sinaloa, Jalisco, New Generation, MS-13, Trinidad, and others infiltrate our country during the Biden administration?
By the tens of thousands.
Well, and what progress have you been making in combating their presence?
I think the DHS is best to speak to that, but I think I can't remember the numbers of tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of individuals they found that came in illegally, and the tens of thousands that associations to criminal networks have all been deported.
And that effort is being opposed every step of the way by Democratic leaders in our cities, some of our states, and right here in the Congress. Isn't that true?
Well, we're just working where we can in every single city we can, and I welcome the opportunity to partner with Republicans or Democrats on fighting violent crime like we're doing.
Mr. Biggs asked about Arctic frost. What else can you tell us about that and what we need to do to assure that it never happens again?
Continue the congressional oversight work that you're doing on Arctic frost. Let me provide you with more documentation on Arctic frost, and also call in witnesses from the paperwork that we have given you. You have that right, and the American public deserves to hear what those people have to say. As for my ongoing investigation, there's not much I can say.
What role did the FBI play in suppressing the Hunter Biden laptop story during the 2024 election?
Off the top of my memory, sir, I believe the FBI was in possession of verified information from that laptop, and it was improperly publicized that they did not have information and masked it as Russian disinformation. We now know that was categorically false. I don't know why the FBI did that, when they did that, but we've released all the materials related to that.
Thank you.
Gentleman yields back. The gentleman from New York is recognized. Mr. Goldman.
Mr. Patel, does Donald Trump appear anywhere in the Epstein files?
But everyone knew this moment wasn't about numbers. It was about what those files might contain and who didn't want them seen. Because when you say zero, it doesn't mean nothing happened. It means everything stayed hidden. That's when the Congresswoman switched gears. She asked if Americans were safer now than they were 9 months ago. Patel nodded, pointing to a spike in arrests and a sharp drop in violent crime. He said, "Who would have thought that taking criminals off the streets actually reduces crime?" The audience chuckled, but the sarcasm wasn't lost. It was a jab at the years of chaos, the years where, as Patel claimed, the FBI's focus was turned inward, toward politics, not protection. "We're just letting good cops be cops," he said. "We're using ground-based intelligence instead of weaponizing law enforcement." And whether you agreed with him or not, it was a message that hit millions watching at home. The idea that the FBI had stopped chasing criminals to start chasing politics. That's a storyline no one could ignore. But then the questions got sharper. The Congresswoman wanted to know why so many Democrats were opposing his policies, especially as crime dropped in cities like Washington, D.C. Patel didn't blink. "Democrats have been attacking me for a decade," he said. "They didn't like that I exposed the Russia hoax, the biggest weaponization of the FBI and DOJ in U.S. history." It was a defiant statement, one that reignited old wars in Washington. To his supporters, it was proof of courage. To his critics, it was a provocation. But either way, the tension in that room was now boiling over. And it was about to get even hotter. The next topic was one that had haunted the last administration, the border crisis. "How many gotaways crossed during those years?" she asked. Patel didn't give a number. Instead, he painted a picture. "The first step is identifying them. The second is hunting them down. And that's what we're doing now." He went on to describe how the southern border had been sealed, but that the northern border had quietly become the new entry point for potential threats. "The enemy adapts," he said, "and we have to adapt faster." Then he listed the places these threats were coming from: China, Russia, the Middle East, Africa, Afghanistan. It wasn't just an immigration problem. It was a security problem, and one that he said had been ignored for years. That line, "the enemy adapts," hit hard. Because it wasn't just about borders. It was about what happens when you focus on the wrong fight. But then came a question no one expected. What about the terrorist cells already inside the United States? Patel took a deep breath. "That's one of my highest priorities," he said. "We've already taken down multiple rings in cities like New York, Los Angeles, and Dallas. That alone would have been headline-worthy." But he didn't stop there. He confirmed that the criminal cartels, Sinaloa, Jalisco New Generation, MS-13, had infiltrated the U.S. by the tens of thousands during the previous years, and when asked what his agency was doing about it, he said bluntly, "We're deporting them." The room went silent again. The simplicity of that statement carried more weight than the data could, but it wasn't over. Because the next question opened a door to something far darker. Mr. Biggs asked about something called Arctic frost. The Congresswoman said, "What can you tell us about it?" Patel's expression changed. This was no longer about politics or border security. His tone shifted from defensive to careful that he said, "Continue your oversight. The American people deserve to hear what those witnesses have to say." He promised to provide documentation and even hinted that there were people ready to testify if Congress would call them in. But beyond that, he couldn't say more. He called it an ongoing investigation. And that was all the country needed to hear to know something massive was being hidden behind that phrase. 2 words, Arctic frost, were suddenly trending across every social platform. And the theories started flying within hours. But just when everyone thought the hearing had peaked, it took another unexpected turn. The Congresswoman asked about the one topic that's divided America for years, the Hunter Biden laptop. Off the top of my memory, Patel said, the FBI had verified data from that laptop, but they masked it as Russian disinformation. He looked directly at the panel as he said it, emphasizing each word. We now know that was categorically false. For a moment, it wasn't about left or right. It was about truth and trust. Because if the FBI really did have verified data and still buried it, the implications were enormous. Patel added that all materials related to that case had been released, and that transparency would continue. It was one of the most direct answers of the entire session. But it was also a setup for what came next, the question that stopped the entire hearing cold. Mr. Patel, said the congressman from New York, does Donald Trump appear anywhere in the Epstein files? The room froze. There was no noise, no side conversations, no shuffling papers, just that one question hanging in the air, heavier than anything said before it. Every camera zoomed in. Every journalist leaned forward, and for a few seconds, Patel didn't move. His eyes locked on the committee member across from him. He didn't answer. Not yet, because everyone knew. Whatever came next could change everything. The clip of that moment would go viral within minutes. Not because of what was said, but because of what wasn't. That silence told its own story, a story about power, secrets, and what still remains locked inside those Epstein files. Files that Patel claims to have released by the thousands, and yet somehow still hold the biggest names in Washington, Hollywood, and beyond, because thousands of pages doesn't mean the truth has been told. It just means the cover may be cracking, and as the hearing wrapped, you could feel that tension linger. Every word Patel said, every question he didn't answer, it left the public with one realization. There's still more. More names, more files, more questions no one's willing to say out loud. And when oversight begins again, Arctic Frost and Epstein might just become two parts of the same unfinished story. What happens next depends on who's willing to keep asking those questions. Because for years, these hearings were about politics, but now they're about exposure. And once something like this starts unraveling, it rarely stops. If you've made it this far, you already know how deep this story runs. So, if you want to stay ahead of what's coming, make sure to subscribe, hit that notification bell, and drop a comment with your thoughts, because this isn't just another headline. This is the story that powerful people hoped you'd never hear, and the next chapter is coming soon.